Hello, my dear Franken friends, and welcome to Spookyou, your one-stop shop for all things ghastly and ghoulish. I'm your host, Barnabas Vixen. How horrible of you to join us. Curl up, invite your friends, and by all means, make sure those lights are out. That way it's harder to tell what may or may not be lurking around you. There's nothing like a good mystery, am I right? Tonight will feature a singular tale of devilish design, curated by those wicked weavers of woe. And without further ado, allow me to pass the reins on over to our vivacious voiceover virtuoso, Trey Falco, for tonight's sinister story. Please keep all limbs inside covers at all times. We wouldn't want anything to go missing now, would we?
This is a bad idea. Melissa was right. This was a bad idea. We're still gonna do it though, right? I asked, my voice shaking. Fuck yeah, we are, Damien grinned. If it weren't for him, I never would have had the nerve to show up that cold January night. I don't think Melissa would have either. The three of us stood outside of Mrs. Hudson's garage, our black clothes and acne-ridden faces lit faintly by the glow of the moon. Damien shrugged his duffel bag off his shoulder and onto the ground. He knelt down, unzipping it as gingerly as he could. My eyes darted between Damien, who was rifling through his bag of tricks, and Melissa. Her eyes were fixed on the half-circle window above the garage. I followed her gaze, but saw nothing other than the tattered curtains Mrs. Hudson had always seemed to keep drawn. "Are you sure that's not her bedroom?" Melissa hissed to me. "What if she wants to let some air in?" And Damien stood up from his bag, a heavy pair of bolt cutters in his hands. They looked older than he did. "It's not her bedroom, it's like an attic or something. Besides, do you honestly think she's still awake at her age?" Without pausing for a reply, Damien walked up to the garage door and inspected the chain inexplicably slung across it. And then he got to work. Melissa and I watched for a few moments as he tried to cut through the thick, rusted metal of the chain. The grunts of frustration let us know that this wasn't as easy as he'd been expecting. Not wanting to embarrass Damien by staring, I let my eyes drift away from his struggles and back up to the window. My heart seemed to stop and then race to catch up on the missing beats. The curtains were moving. I was sure they had been still just moments before. Guys, oh fuck, I think... Jesus, Parker, would it kill you to be quiet for like a minute? Damien snapped, not in the mood for hearing what I had to say. "I've almost," he grunted, "got this." As he said it, the chain finally snapped, falling in two pieces on the ground. In that moment, I think all three of us realized that we should have thought things through a bit more. The sound of metal on concrete was unmistakable and loud. "We have to go, now!" I grabbed Damien's arm, but he shook me off. "Parker, it's fine. She's an old woman and she's indoors. Do you honestly think that she heard that?" There was a slight quiver to his voice, and I wasn't sure if Damien was trying to convince me or convince himself. Either way, I'd had enough. No, fuck this, I'm leaving. As I turned to leave, Melissa's voice was the only thing that stopped me. "Parker." I turned back around. "You're right. We should go." She said it quietly, almost embarrassed, as if she'd only just realized how bad an idea breaking and entering really was. "Oh, come on. That was the hardest part anyway." Damien looked back and forth between Melissa and me, waiting for one of us to change our minds. And when we didn't, his face fell. "Screw both of you guys." He sounded more hurt than angry. I felt a prickly sensation run down my spine as I realized just how close Damien was to getting into Mrs. Hudson's garage. I thought of what my parents would say if they knew I was out here breaking into our neighbor's house, and I made the final decision to leave. Melissa followed me as I went, and I hoped Damien would come after, but he didn't. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a wire coat hanger. I'm not his dad. And just like that, I'd justified leaving my friend alone. Melissa and I barely spoke on the walk home. I snuck back into my bedroom the same way I snuck out, up the tree next door, a very careful jump perfected through years of practice to my roof, and then through the window. Getting in was easy, but I didn't sleep well that night. I tossed and turned, head swirling with guilt over leaving Damien and trying to break into the garage in the first place. First thing the next morning, I checked my phone in the hope that I'd find a message from Damien. Maybe his heist went well after all. But when I checked, there were no new messages. He must be pissed. I tried to shove aside the requisite angsty teenage feelings welling up in me long enough to grab some pancakes and say goodbye to my dad's. Like every morning, I met Melissa at her house, but I didn't wish her a good morning. Without thinking, the first thing out of my mouth was, "Have you heard from Damien?" She hadn't heard from him either. If he isn't texting Melissa, he must really be mad. We stopped outside of Damien's house on our way. Sometimes Damien would get a ride from his mom, so not seeing him at the door wasn't much of a surprise. Melissa didn't seem too bothered by it, but for some reason, when I didn't see him there, my heart sank. "Do you think he's avoiding us?" I asked as we continued on our walk. Melissa laughed lightly, but didn't smile. "Wouldn't you?" Damien and I didn't have class together until third period, so I tried to put him out of my mind for the meantime. I didn't bother texting him. If he was mad, knowing him, he'd stay mad. The morning came and went, and before long I found myself sitting in French class. Madame Martin entered as she typically did, a coffee in one hand and an iPad in the other. As she pulled up a presentation about conjugating air, or something like that, I wasn't actually paying attention. I looked over to Damien's desk. No Damien. My mind started to race. Maybe he was just running late, or maybe he got caught. Continuing to ignore the lesson on something that I almost certainly would someday fuck up on a test, I grabbed my phone from my pocket to text Melissa. Damien's not here. I slipped the phone into my desk so I'd be able to see if the screen lit up with a new message. "Parker?" Madame Martin called my name. Yes?" She sighed. "The question I just asked, Parker, what is the answer?" God, I hated when she did this. Anytime you weren't paying attention, you could be sure that Madame Martin not only noticed, but would put you on the spot. Most of the teachers at our school were nice, but Madame Martin seemed to really like embarrassing you in front of the whole class. She got some sort of weird thrill from it. It was kind of creepy how much she liked making students squirm. But for once, I wasn't paying attention for a good reason. Not that I could tell her that. I figured, I'm just worried about a friend. I think he might have been arrested because last I saw him, he was breaking into a garage. Probably wouldn't go over well. "Sorry, madam. I wasn't listening. My phone vibrated loudly against the metal of my desk, cutting me off and ending any chance I had of talking my way out of it. "Phone, Parker." Great. Not only did I have to give up my phone, I had to walk all the way to the front of the class to give it to her. I heard the quiet jeering of my classmates. I slouched my way to the front, my face turning red hot as I did. Before putting the phone in Madame Martin's hand, I caught a glimpse of the message preview on my lock screen. It was from Melissa. I tried texting him all last period. I haven't got anything but... "That will be all, Parker." I walked back to my desk, still trying to ignore the giggles. The rest of the class went by painfully slowly. It was hard for me to keep still at the best of times, let alone when I was worried about Damien. I tapped on the tabletop and my right leg bounced frantically up and down. "Would you cut it out?" I didn't even look up at the girl next to me. "No." She let out an and loudly scraped her chair across the floor, angling it away from me. Normally I wouldn't be so curt, but I couldn't help it. I stared at the clock above Madame Martin's smartboard, willing it to move faster. It didn't work. I didn't get my phone back at the end of the period. Madam said she wouldn't let me have it back until the end of the day. I thought that might be illegal, but I wasn't sure, so I didn't say anything. Besides, it's not like I wasn't complicit in any law breaking. Melissa and I had our last period together, English. She tried to get my attention when I walked in the room, and for a moment I debated going over and talking to her. Then I remembered the essay I still hadn't finished and decided against it. I shook my head no at her, and she tilted hers to the side and sighed. "You're already done with your essay. I'm not," I thought, hoping it somehow came through in my facial expressions. But instead of responding, Melissa turned away. Great. The period was uneventful. For a while, I was able to tear myself away from thoughts of Damien and focus instead on my writing. I didn't think my essay was going to win any awards, but my dads would probably be happy with it, and that's all that really mattered. That's all school was for anyway. Make your teacher happy, make your parents happy, move on to the next assignment. I stuck my laptop back into my bag and tried to zip it up, but I yanked it too hard and ripped the zipper off entirely. I stood dumbfounded for a moment before tossing the metal pull inside the bag. Whatever. It could hang open. I was so preoccupied with my zipper situation, I didn't notice Melissa had crept up behind me. Parker. Oh shit, Melissa. I wondered how much of the zipper thing she saw. I wondered if I looked like a dumbass. Probably. Why didn't you write me back? Oh, yeah, Madam took my phone. Melissa looked disappointed in me, but continued. Okay, so you have an Android, right? Yeah, I said, straightening up, backpack over one arm, laptop still sticking out of the open pocket. I don't like iPhones. I hate how the UI... Not important. She cut me off. Looking back, I don't blame her. What's important is that Damien and I both have iPhones. So what? I sounded a little defensive. I thought about saying, hey, I didn't mean to sound so defensive, but I was pretty sure that would just make me sound more defensive. So, she replied, scrolling through her phone, Damien had his location sharing on. She held the phone up, and it took me a moment to process what I was looking at. Damien, or at least his phone, was still at Mrs. Hudson's house? Melissa nodded. We have to go back. I said it without even thinking. I think Damien would have done the same for either of us. Well, probably. He could be kind of a dick, but he was a loyal dick. I know. We didn't bother waiting for the cover of Nightfall this time. This time, we reasoned, we weren't trying to commit any crimes, just trying to find our friend. That's kind of the opposite of a crime, if you think about it. The first thing we saw when we walked up to Mrs. Hudson's driveway stopped us both in our tracks.
Hello, listener. Barnabas here, and I'd like to take a moment to talk to you about something that's very near and dear to our hearts here at Spookyou. Blood. That succulent scarlet, the crimson cascade of delicious viscera. We can't get enough of it, and we hear you have plenty. That's why we've partnered with Dr. Acula's Blood Bank. Doc Acula is a medically licensed professional specializing in the removal and storage of that sweet life juice that flows through your veins. With your contribution, you'll be able to feed hundreds of starving vampirites with a single donation. And think of the tax write-off. Am I right? Call today for your free consultation and see what you can do to help your community. Don't forget to bring some form of identification, proof of residency. That way we know which community vault to file away your precious cargo, and a notarized copy of your most recent will. Consultation usually takes a few minutes, while your donation will last a lifetime. Oh, Dr. Acula's Blood Bank. Proudly supporting impoverished vampire communities for over 3,000 years. Thank you for allowing us to get that message off our chest and implant it into your prefrontal cortexes. We now return you to your stories.
The chain. The chain that we had both watched Damien cut through was back up. No, that's not right. The chain Damien cut down was rusted. It had been there for years and it had shown. The chain had been replaced. The new chain was thicker and shinier than the old one had ever been. It was pulled taut across the garage door. But the chain wasn't the only new addition. Melissa elbowed me and pointed silently to a brand new sign that had been stuck into the lawn. No trespassing. We stood in quiet contemplation for a moment, planning our next move. I was anxious, but if Damien was here, I wasn't just going to walk away. Melissa finally broke the silence. We should call him. I nodded and reached for my pocket. Fuck. I forgot to get my phone back. Damn it! Melissa barely reacted to my outburst, grabbing her own phone instead and scrolling through her contacts to find Damien. I hoped he'd pick up, but my hopes were dashed almost immediately. I hadn't realized that Damien had left his ringer on. I mean, who does that? But he had. Melissa and I both listened as the default iPhone jingle played quietly somewhere around us. There. She pointed towards the lawn. My heart sank as I looked out onto the lawn and saw the cracked screen of Damien's iPhone 6 nestled in the long grass. I watched it light up, Melissa's name on the screen. But Damien wasn't there. No trespassing sign be damned. I walked out onto the lawn to pick up the phone. As I reached down to get it, I froze. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand on end, a jolt of electricity down my spine. Someone was watching me, and it wasn't just Melissa. I took a deep breath, grabbed the phone, and backed off the lawn. Parker? Melissa's voice quivered. I think we should go. I could tell by the look on her face that she felt it too. She snuck one last peek back at the house and then ran, and we didn't stop until we were back at my house. Neither of my dads were home when we got there, which was probably for the best. I didn't know what they would have said if they'd seen me and Melissa covered in sweat, gasping for air like we'd just run a marathon. I guessed it wouldn't just be, hey honey, how was school? My bedroom was a mess. Clothes, dirty and clean, had collected in a pile on my floor. Realizing Melissa was going to have to come in here as well, I tried to shuffle some of the shirts and jeans to the side. I picked up a milk crate of advanced Dungeons & Dragons reference materials that Damien and I had found at Value Village from the middle of the floor. I put it on top of my bookcase, hoping the extra weight wouldn't make the whole damn thing fall over. Exhausted, I collapsed onto my bed. Melissa, the more fit of the two of us, was downstairs grabbing us each a glass of water. I wasn't being a great host, but Melissa had been over so many times she was practically part of the family anyway. I stared at the ceiling. I wanted to think of something to say to Melissa, an idea to try and find Damien, anything. But my mind wasn't thinking logically. Clear thought had been replaced with mild panic. So I did the same thing I'd done to calm myself down since I was a kid. I counted the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. 1, 2, 3... I knew there were 157, but that didn't stop me. And it didn't stop it from helping. 10, 11, 12... I got to 26 by the time Melissa finally came up with the water. I sat up. She didn't say anything as she handed me the glass. We sipped quietly, and I could hear her breathing, heavier than normal. I wondered if mine was too. I couldn't tell, it just always sounded loud to me. We have to call the cops. Melissa's proclamation stirred me from my stupor. She was probably right. I had Damien's phone in my hand. Touch ID failed, obviously, so I put in his passcode, 6969. Obviously. Together we looked through the missed calls, from Melissa of course, but from Damien's mother as well. I realized now that we wouldn't have to call the cops. If she'd been unable to reach Damien, Miss Allen had almost certainly called them already. I heard a noise downstairs that nearly made me jump out of my skin. The door unlocking. Parker? Hey, Pop! I yelled down to him. Then I heard a sigh of relief. Hey, Mr. Charles. Melissa liked Pop. They were always pretty close. I listened as Pop locked the door behind him and then climbed the stairs to the second floor. I have a clear view of the stairs from my bedroom, and as I watched Pop reach the top, I could tell something was off. His normal smile was replaced with a frown and worry lines drawn deep across his forehead. As his eyes met mine, the worry shifted to anger. Parker, earlier today Miss Allen called me. As far as she knows, Damien's gone missing. I tried to call you as soon as I heard, but you haven't been writing to me or Dad for hours. I felt my throat closing up. I hadn't even thought about what my parents would be thinking this whole time. I swallowed and it was painful. I called the school when I couldn't find you. I left work early and picked this. He threw the cell phone at me, and I almost caught it too. Up from the school, and spent the next 20 minutes driving around trying to find you. I glanced at Melissa out of the corner of my eye. Her face turned slightly red, embarrassed. For me, for herself, God only knows. Pop liked Melissa, but he hadn't even acknowledged that she was here. Well? Pop demanded an answer, even though he hadn't asked anything. Pop, I stumbled through the words as I tried not to think about what I'd put him and Dad through. I tried not to think about what Miss Allen was still going through. I need to tell you something, and I know you're going to be mad, but it's important. It's about Damien.
Welcome back, my darling deviants. Well, tell me, did you enjoy that twisted tale? Of course you did. I knew you had that air about you, that hunger for the horrific and the macabre. So, did we spook you? If not, then file a complaint with our complaint department detailing all accounts of non-spookiness you found in this video, and we'll get back to you in 2 to 3 millennia. Give or take a business eon or two. However, if you've enjoyed what you've just heard this evening, then make sure you leave a like on this video and annihilate that subscribe button. Such a small act of obedience is exactly what we need to put the food on the table around here. There's only so many days we can have refried kidney and toe jam hash before I'm absolutely sick of it. Spoiler alert, that ship sailed long ago. Now, I must bid you adieu. I've many things to take care of, and this outro is eating into my day off. Run along now. Have no fear, we'll be here every Tuesday and Thursday to bring you another terrible tale. Go forth, my ghastly gang, and stay spooky.